So this is where we find out what the loud thump from upstairs is. So we left it yesterday. Suddenly there was a loud thump from upstairs. Mum stared at the ceiling. Whatever's that? It's probably just Tom Tom messing with my stuff, I said. That cat is like a furry wrecking ball, Mum moaned. Go and sort out your pet, Thomas. I didn't need telling twice, not with half a roly-poly still sitting on the table staring at me menacingly. I raced upstairs. Tom Tom, come out, I said crossly as I stepped into my room. I looked around for the ginger cat, ready to give him his marching orders, but he wasn't anywhere to be seen. Then I noticed the dragon fruit wasn't there, where I'd left it on the desk. It was on the floor by my bed, and once more, it had grown. Now the dragon fruit was glowing and growing. I decided it was best to keep it out of sight from Mum and Dad and away from Tom Tom, so I pulled out one of the storage drawers from the wooden unit that was crammed with all my toys. Shoving a heap of little plastic play figures to either side, I placed the fruit inside. My hands came away covered in sticky goo, like it was oozing juice or slime. Remembering the possibility of toxic meltdown, I quickly wiped my hands. Then I crawled into bed, eyes fixed on the drawer and the glowing coming from inside. To be honest, it wasn't the behaviour I'd come to expect from fruit. I mean, bananas and mangoes never did this sort of thing. Even with kiwi fruit, you know where you are, but this, frankly, it was weird. I had every intention of keeping a close watch on the fruit, but after all the digging and wrestling with my bongleweed, I was so tired my nighttime vigil probably lasted about 3.5 minutes. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when my eyes suddenly snapped open. The room was dark, but there was still a glow from the drawer. Suddenly, the whole wooden unit began to rattle and shake. That must have been what woke me, and then, just as quickly, it stopped. I peeled back the covers and crept out of bed. I switched on my rocket lamp and crouched down next to the drawer. Slowly, I opened it and peered in. The fruit sat there, glowing but unmoving. Had I been imagining things? I rolled my eyes at my own crazy imagination and then checked the room for the unicycling gorilla who usually turns up in my dreams. But there was no gorilla, which meant this was no dream. I turned back to the fruit and then jumped in alarm as it began to move, shaking the drawer again. And this time I clearly saw one side of it bulge. It was as if something inside was trying to burst out. The skin stretched and the spiky leaves stuck out as the bulge moved under the surface. I thought of the worm I'd once found in a pear from Grandad's garden. What if some kind of monstrous maggot was squirming its way out of the dragon fruit? The thing twisted and writhed and pushed, and I started to back away. There was no way I wanted a mutant maggot launching at my face. But as I took another step, I stumbled over King Kong and came crashing to the floor. I kept my eyes fixed on the still rattling drawer, and then there was an almighty pop! Like a cork from a bottle, something shot over my head. A spray of messy pulp and little black seeds covered the floor and splattered my trouser leg. For a second I just lay there, eyes pinned wide open. Then I heard scratching and a noise like someone striking a match. I spun around, my eyes scanning the floor to see where the maggot, or whatever it was, had landed. But all I could see were the toys I hadn't put away. There was a scratching sound again, like the fizzle of a match igniting. Whatever was making the sound was behind my beanbag. The match struck for a third time. I edged closer, keeping my eyes firmly on the mound of the beanbag. As I bent towards it, one edge moved. There was something wriggling underneath, trying to squirm its way out. Where was Tom Tom when I needed him? He'd left enough sad little critters on my carpet over the years as presents. He'd definitely know what to do with some kind of mutant fizzing worm. My heart was hammering in my chest. I'd have run a mile, but if I took my eyes off it, it might slink away, and then I'd have to go back to bed knowing it could be somewhere in the room with me. I grabbed a mug from the desk and stood up, ready to trap whatever it was. Slowly and very, very gingerly, I lifted a corner of the beanbag. Every bit of me was poised, ready to jump out of my skin if the thing came shooting out at me. I lifted the beanbag higher, millimetre by millimetre, until I saw it. lying curling underneath. The mad hammering in my chest started to calm as I gazed down at the tiny creature in front of me, which was most definitely not a mutant maggot, although quite what it was I had no idea. It looked like a bird, but it had thorny little spines down its back, and it seemed more leathery than feathery. It was bright red, and its wings were scalloped a bit like a bat's, and it shimmered in the light of my rocket lamp, like it was having trouble deciding on the very best shade of red to be. As I stood there, my mouth gaping, it raised its head, swung it from side to side, and sneezed. Only what came out wasn't spit and bogies, but a bright little spark and a wheeze of smoke. And that's when my brain woke up and I knew, for sure and no messing, that what was nestled in my Batman dressing gown, scratching its claws across Robin's head as it hopped from foot to foot, was an actual dragon. There's the picture. Okay, so maybe you'd be totally cool if you found a dragon in your bedroom. Maybe it wouldn't faze you at all and you'd know just what to do. You'd be all like, hey, cool, that's a cool dragon. I'm cool about that. But me, I didn't have a clue what to do, and I definitely wasn't feeling cool about it. I mean, it was a dragon. It might only have been big enough that it could sit on my hand, so far as its fire breathing had only produced a tiny spark, but hello, it was a dragon. It made the strange fizzling match sound again, and the most I could manage to get out at this point was a whispered, "Whoa." Then we stared at each other for a really long time. My head is always brimming with ideas and stories. Miss Logan says my imagination is like a geyser gushing out ideas 24 hours a day. But right then it was like the geyser had been sat on by one of those enormous elephant seals with the weird shrunken trunk, and all I could squeeze out was, "There's a dragon in my room, on my carpet, right now." Talk about stating the obvious. Then bit by bit the elephant seal flubbered away and the geyser spluttered back to life. I pictured my dragon shooting out mighty flames and me riding across the sky on its back, and I thought, I'm going to have the most utterly mind-blowing, amazingest pet of all time. Move over, Liam. I have the best bike, scooter, radio-controlled biplane and obstacle-leaping hamster Saucon, and make room for my dragon. Suddenly the little creature took a flutter hop towards me, and for a second I wondered if it would turn out to be as mean as all the books had said dragons were and launch itself at my face. Maybe it'd send flames at my eyes or scratch me with its sharp claws. This could be a dangerous pet. I'd probably go into school with scars and have to explain how I had to wrestle my pet to the ground before I could get out of the door. I guess that might not be ideal, not on a day-to-day basis anyway. I started weighing up the pros and cons, remembering the cuddly class guinea pig, then comparing it to a ferocious, limb-shredding, fire-breathing reptile. But even with possible loss of limbs, there didn't seem much contest. A dragon would make a really cool pet. And the more I watched it, the more I realised that this particular dragon didn't look very mean or dangerous. In fact, as it tilted its head to one side and hiccuped out a little smoke ring, the word that kept popping into my head was cute. I stayed as still as I could. I remembered something about letting dogs sniff your hand before you say hello to them, so when it didn't move again, I slowly reached out my hand, resting it on the carpet just in front of the little creature. Another flutter hop, and there was a dragon sitting on the palm of my hand. An actual live dragon. It kept its wings half unfurled as it swept its head from side to side, inspecting my fingers, which were now warm from its breath. I could feel its claws treading into my skin like a cat trying to get comfy. I didn't dare move in case it disappeared in a puff of "this can't really be happening" smoke. I slowly got to my feet, keeping my hand as steady as I could. Suddenly I decided to assume it was a he, started jiggling from foot to foot, leaning forward as if he was about to launch, but then pulling back. Like I did on the diving board at the pool, wanting to dive, but hating the moment when I'd have to step off into nothing but air. I thought about how baby birds learn to fly, and also how I'd seen their tiny bodies on the ground sometimes. The ones who'd flown too soon. Was it the same with dragons? Before I could open my mouth to speak, he had taken the plunge. For a moment, the tiny dragon was flapping upwards, his nose thrust forward, his wings shimmering. But then he blew out a smoky puff and began to drop, and my heart sank. I lurched forward to catch him, but just before he landed in my outstretched hands, he flapped and rose again, and he was off, soaring away over my bed. Still reeling a bit from side to side, but most definitely in the air, aloft. I watched as he swooped back round and landed with a bump on my desk. In my relief and excitement, because, let's be clear, a dragon had just flown round my bedroom, I clapped my hands and gave a whoop of delight. The little dragon lifted his head. He let out another smoky hiccup, this time followed by a tiny orange spark, and then he hopped towards me. Things I noticed from close up. Glittery wings. I wonder if you could draw this. Glittery wings, scales that rippled through every shade of red, eyes like diamonds, hot smoky breath, sharp claws, 3 at the front and 1 at the back of each foot. An arrowhead arrowhead tail, which he didn't seem to be able to control very well, because every so often he could whip it round and bash himself, and then twist his head round in alarm as if he was being attacked. And 2 little horns, one longer than the other. Things I did not notice. Tom-Tom. We'll leave it there for today. I wonder if you could draw that dragon. Glittery wings, scales in every shade of red, eyes like diamonds, hot smoky breath, sharp claws, 3 at the front and 1 at the back of each foot, arrowhead tail and 2 little horns. I look forward to seeing your pictures.